With me is Associate Professor of Practice Daniel Leavell in the OSU College of Forestry. Professor Leavell specializes in forest fire science. I also have Professor of Mechanical Engineering David Blunck at the College of Engineering. Part of his research focuses on the science of forest fire spread. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. First, to start us off, could I get a little bit of background on yourselves and your involvement in work relating to forest fires, either in general or at OSU?
Dan, you want to start?
Well, I came here with fire background. I did wildland fires for a number of years, structure fires and forestry and silviculture simultaneously. I came to Oregon State in 2014 after a career in those fields.
And for me, I'm newer to the field than Dan. I came here to Oregon State in 2013 and then got into wildfire research about 2015.
Awesome. And given these backgrounds, what are your reactions to the LA fires happening as of right now?
If I can say, my heart goes out to all of those affected by the fires. I know the pain and the stress involved, and I'm very sorry, and I hope they are doing the best they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Given their circumstances, there's nothing comparable as of right now.
Right.
And given your involvement in some of the fire ecology, to start off with some science aspects, could you explain how some wildfires like those in Eaton and the Palisades might spread from larger landscapes and just kind of develop over time?
Well, fires do spread. Fire behavior is determined by weather, topography, and fuels. And as long as there are fuels to burn, any organic base can burn, can be a fuel. And as long as weather is hot and dry enough, drying those fuels out and the wind kicks up and it gets hot and dry, there will be fire. 90% of all fires in the country are human caused. So it wasn't always that way, but it is now. And so there is a high probability of fires occurring across these landscapes.
Yeah, absolutely. And given this, do you think there are other factors besides the 90% of humans that might cause this, like forest health and even the landscape management, that could contribute to the wildfire risk?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on what's happened in the ecosystem. So my understanding is in the LA area, the last 2 winters, there's been a relatively large amount of rain. That's helped a lot of vegetation. That's great. And now they've had a very dry spell. So you have all this vegetation that's burned and now, or that's grown, and now it dries out. So factors like that, the cycle that can set up, of fuel being present in the right conditions makes it very prone to burn.
Yeah, absolutely. And given some of your prior work in regards to research and some of the spread of embers specifically, how would you go about trying to simulate some of these ember spreads and trying to show the spread in conditions like these?
Great question, thank you. So to make sure we're on the same page, so one of the ways that fire spread is essentially a flame coming up against something, but there's another mechanism that firebrands can be spread, and that is while things are burning, pieces of burning material can break off, the wind can take it, and they can transport it literally miles, and then they can land, and if the conditions are right, they can start new fires. We call these spot fires. And so I anticipate that in a lot of these fires in California that the spread of firebrands has been a dominant mode of how these fires have spread so quickly and been so devastating. And so we realize that, and you step back, well, how at a place like Oregon State or other places, how can we study to better understand things like firebrands? And so usually when we have a problem like this, we take what we know is happening to cause these fires spread, and you say, what do we not understand from a scientific perspective? And then you design experiments or do simulations in computers to better understand something that's related to, in this case, firebrands. And then the goal is then to link that back to better either have new measures to adopt or new policies or things like that to ultimately help reduce the risk from these fires.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I ask a little further what some of these like simulations or like creations to simulate these experiences might entail?
Sure. So for my personal experiment, we are studying firebrands. We burned trees, varying sizes. We've burned trees, and most recently we started burning structures.
Okay.
And so think of a fairly large garden shed, And so we'll burn the garden sheds, and then we put sheets of fabric around, and then we collect the firebrands that land on it. And our ultimate goal is to say, per pounds that burned, what's the number of these firebrands that are released for things like garden sheds. But then the goal is, of course, what we really want to do is understand how that relates to houses or other structures. And so we've done different sizes of sheds, and then we'll use that to estimate for larger structures how many can spread. And then this year we have new efforts we're going to try to look at under the influence of wind.
Oh, absolutely. Understandable. And so when it comes to using these simulations for kind of community-based engagement, how would community-oriented strategies kind of develop from these simulations or practices?
Dan, you want to take a back at that?
Well, it's very critical. What David is doing is extremely critical because when you have an 80 to 100 mile per hour hot, dry wind pushing a fire front, I've been on fires that have a 200 to 400 foot flame length going 80 miles per hour with embers driving the fire miles ahead of itself. It's important to know the dynamics of that, but it's also important to know everything that could be done to reduce the risk of that. And there's so much we can do in our communities, in our structures, on our landscapes. So much we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Given all the things we can do you think that there can be certain risk assessments conducted to improve the planning for these implementations?
I do, and I think it's very critical. And there's a lot of, so fire is not a risk. Fire is a hazard. Fire is a hazard like a ladder is a hazard, a chainsaw is a hazard, your car is a hazard. It can be beneficial and it can be detrimental. Mm-hmm. So it's important to understand that fire as a hazard has the probability to cause a high degree of harm to us, to other values. So it's important to put that into the context of reducing that risk, because the probability of the hazard causing a degree of harm is the risk. Yeah. And if we understand that, we can put the practices in place. We can clean our gutters. We can put on metal or asphalt roofs instead of wood shingle roofs. We can clean hedges around the home. We can do so many practices in the structure and around the structure in the community. We can reduce fuel, which we can control. We can do that and really make a difference in that. So there is a lot to do if we understand the concepts of what the fire can do, would do under certain circumstances, especially during fire season.
Absolutely. And I heard you mention that there are cases in which fire can be beneficial. For those that are unaware, would you be able to describe some of these circumstances?
Very much. Fire is beneficial when we have a safe campfire, when we burn a candle safely, when we cook on a barbecue. When we could also take that to prescribed burning, if it's done safely, and it can be extremely beneficial for the ecosystem, for vegetation, for us. And what we need to understand how to do that safely. And we know how, we just need to implement that. But so much can be done with prescribed burning.
Yeah, and when it comes to prescribed burning, how would this come into action when it comes to mitigating the effects of fires like the LA one?
When fire behavior is determined, and it was determined by an engineer, not a fire manager, the fire behavior studies were developed by engineers. So what David is doing is maintaining a critical tradition. But fire can be used to reduce fuel. So we can manually reduce fuel. We can prescribe burn to reduce fuel. And that's one side of that fire behavior triangle we can control. We can't really control the weather. We can't really control the topography, but we can control the fuel.
Absolutely.
And the more we do that on a scale on a landscape scale especially, the more we can reduce the risk of a fire having a negative effect.
Yes, absolutely. That makes sense. And so when it comes to just these general investigations on how we can better these strategies and further develop them, how do they inform strategies for the community rather than just the scientific aspects of learning? How would these apply outside of the lab and into the home or even into the community?
I'll give a piece of this and then I'll hear what Dan says. Let me give an example. So we've partnered with an organization that does research for insurance companies. Insurance companies have a lot of interest in reducing the risk of fire and other hazards, right? And so they do research studying fire behavior and how fire spread, and they feed that information back to insurance companies. And then ultimately the goal is that then that can then funnel up to people who do building, for codes, basically to implement based on what we know, what are changes we can make to reduce the risk relative to fire spread. And that's just one example of how this could be used.
So many people don't understand what fire can and cannot do. And they don't understand how beneficial it could be or how detrimental it can be. So the College of Forestry, our Oregon State University, is wonderful in many ways, but it has a combination of academic, scientific, and extension throughout the university. And 5 colleges work on an extension basis. That extension under the College of Forestry, we have a fire extension program that takes these concepts, this science that David is building, that has been built, and they take it out to the communities, to the individuals. People need to know about fire. If you ask the majority of people on these communities, the first reaction they have when they hear the word fire, the majority of people react in fear. They need to react with understanding. They need to react in a way that hopes for the best but plans for the worst. They need to be prepared. They need to put the extinguishers in the home. Most fires start in the kitchens, and they need to have a special fire extinguisher for oil-based fires. Well, not many people know that. Well, they need to have smoke alarms. They need to have evacuation plans. They need to have a way to get out of that burning structure if it should burn, and how to get meat together and evacuate. And it needs to be set up ahead of time, but that takes education. That takes outreach. Taking this science and putting it out is what we do, and we do it very well.
Absolutely. It's almost like taking it steps at a time, starting within the home, seeing how it can expand, branch out into your community, into your city, into your government even.
And across the landscape.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Do you
Very
think,
important.
I know you mentioned OSU's different projects and things like that, do you think OSU is effectively interconnecting their different geographical and topographical areas and that other universities might be doing for this wildfire research?
I think Oregon State University, and I think the College of Forestry and the College of Engineering, I think our university is leading the pack. Not many universities across the West in fire-prone areas have programs that, 1, develop and invest in the research, that 2, develop and invest in taking that research out into the communities. I'm biased, but Oregon State is the best in doing this.
I mean, yeah.
And I'll just, I'm biased like that, I completely agree. But just building on that, there's incredible strengths in College of Forestry, the College of Agriculture, College of Engineering, and then there's whole elements about social science. And I feel like to have all of those strengths all within one university, I think really positions us uniquely compared to other universities.
Yeah, I can see
I agree
that.
totally with that.
Absolutely. And so my final question for you guys tonight is going to be, if there's any one thing you feel someone watching could take away, what do you feel they should?
My hope is that we realize there's a lot of steps that we can take to essentially reduce or better be in control of the hazard. Now, I realize that a lot of the cases in LA, like there's just nothing people can do other than just be safe, right? And so I don't want to discount that. But unlike other hazards like major storms or floods or things like that, there's a lot that we can do to help reduce the risk of our homes, our structures in our community. And so to feel proactive, as Dan said, to plan for the worst and hope for the best, I think is a great, important mentality we all need to have, especially, well, including here in the Willamette Valley, where I think historically we haven't done that as well.
I agree with David. Have your go bag ready. When fire season comes about, make sure you have a list that everyone annually should recharge your fire extinguishers, should check your smoke alarms annually, just automatically. Well, take it further. Take it further, do something. It could be a little thing, could be cleaning your gutters, it could be raking the dead leaves away from your yard. But if you do that annually, as a matter of course, you're understanding what fire can do. You are taking a proactive approach. Have your go bag ready for yourself, your family, your pets. Don't exclude your pets, please. And there's so much you can proactively do, even if it's minor. It adds up, and it really adds up to make a difference. Tap into others in your community, in your neighborhood. Tap into others beyond that. And know where your local fire department is. Know where, just put all of these pieces in place, you can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Create a sense of preparedness that you might have not had before.
Yes, please do that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for watching The Chew.